when the beat hit, it's queenish. Friday nights be gleaming. We stay hype with guys like no matter what, cause we queenin'. Hey, we queenin'. We queenin'. When them other chicks be scheming, we stay hype cause we queenin'.
With the queens and the feeling, throw them hands up. Got a crown on my head, no we can't be touched.
What up, what up?
Hey y'all.
Hello, hello. Hey, Night Hypers. It's about that time for
The Night Hype Show
with DJ Missy E and
I'm just Fuimdabarber. You know, I'm not nobody important, you know. Shout out to our girl at #swag. Unfortunately, she could not be here tonight. So,
Right.
you know, I'm just filling in for it real quick.
I appreciate the fill-in, girl. I appreciate it. And we're, of course, here at the Stewed, a.k.a. Rebel Cuts.
Rebelville.
Yes, yes, yes. And we have a special guest here as well.
This is going to be so funny.
This is going to be really, really good. I'm really, really excited. We have the author here from the Story of Gumby. Please welcome. I said, please welcome to the stage. Rosalind Gumby
Hey,
Bauchum.
Miss Gumby.
Hello, I'm glad to be here. Thank
I'm glad you can stop by.
Yes.
so much.
Thank you.
I
so
was
much.
like listening to y'all like rehearse, like, and just going over the questions before we started. And it's so crazy because in our generation, like, you don't find people who can actually like research their heritage. And like when they do research it, like you said earlier, they get so far. But the fact that you done research your whole family back to the 1600s is like so crazy to me.
yes. Yes.
Like,
You know what? It was crazy to me too, but it kept on going back and back and back, and I couldn't stop.
yeah.
Mhm.
And we have reached the shores of Africa, and I'm gonna keep going until
Okay.
I go over there and meet someone named Gumby.
All right.
Or the
For real.
tribe.
That is dope.
That is so
There
cool.
are tribes of Gumbies, and over there in Gumby.
And
And they still there, like they're your cousin.
Yeah, just like over here, we have family going back, ancestors back, and so over there, they should be still there.
That is
Still
so
there.
awesome. Well, tell us about the story of Gumby. Tell us about this book. What inspired you to write this book?
Okay, so I'm gonna have to go back. When I was a child, I grew up in a military family, so we moved around a lot. And so I didn't get a chance, or my family didn't get a chance to live around grandparents or aunts and uncles. And I was born on the East Coast, and I had my two older siblings who were born along the Great Lakes in Ohio, and then my younger sibling in Texas. So we were not living around people. And so on trips in the summertime to Pennsylvania, where my father was born, I would ask my grandmother about her family, and then I asked my grandfather about his family. And in doing so, I found out that my grandmother's father and mother were from Virginia. And they would tell me, oh, they were from Virginia. And I said, well, where in Virginia? Clark County, Virginia, for my grandmother's father. And then Front Royal, Virginia. But I kept hearing Front Royal, Front Royal, Front Royal. Likewise, on my mother's side, she was from Texas. And so I do the same thing. My grandmother, where were your people from? Oh, Texas. That's all they said. Oh, Texas. You know, it was quick answers. So that's really how I got into it. And then in high school, Alex Haley in Roots, he was at the forefront of it. And at that time, he didn't have a book. The show wasn't out. That wouldn't come out for years later. But he was writing in this digest called the Reader's Digest. I don't think they have it anymore.
I remember Reader's Digest.
Reader's Digest too.
Yes.
Okay. So he started telling his story in Reader's Digest.
Okay.
And so we had to study that in school, in high school, and English class. So that was also a great influence on me.
Wow.
And so I would take notes on my paternal grandmother's side. You know, wrote down about Front Royal, wrote down about Virginia, And then she would go through the line. My mother's name was this. My father's name was this. So I knew about the Johnsons, and I knew about the Parkers, and then I knew about the Gumbys.
Wow, that's interesting. With your story, back in the day when there was a lot of slavery and well, really that's the only thing that was going on back then.
Right.
There was a bunch of slavery.
At
In
least
your
prior
fam-
to 1865.
Yes, until that part.
That type of slavery.
And you had the story all the way back to the 1600s. So between the 1600s and when they were captured and taken on the boats and all that,
Uh-huh.
what information did you get from there? Like what's part?
Okay, so we know that there were 12 million Africans transported to the Americas.
Mhm.
Most of them went to the Caribbean and South America, and the remaining were brought to what we know now as the United States. Then it was the British colonies.
Mhm.
So I found out from looking at some old records that I just found just by researching online. You Google,
Mhm.
and then you can access certain documents in libraries. So I put Gumby in. So up popped the reference to the year 1655. And so there was a man named Sir William Brocas who owned some slaves. And he had an inventory. So he had all the slaves and their names. And there was Gumby. And he had 50, 55. And that was in the British pound.
Wow.
So that's how much Gumby was worth. And then he had families, and he lists their names, and then he would put the number of pounds. And so that was the first reference.
Wow.
So I looked that up. And that was in Middlesex County, Virginia, in the year 1655. So he owns several slaves. And from that, I kept looking. And so I found a journal, and there was a reference to a Tom Gumby. And so his owner was John Carter. And John Carter came from a very rich family. He was from England. And he owned a lot of land in Virginia. And he owned a lot of slaves, thousands. So they would pass the slaves on to their family. So I found references to Charles. I give my slave, his daughter, this family, my cook. And so I just started putting it together, make notes. And pretty soon I had the whole story about the Carter family. So the slaves, Gumby grew up, he married, and they were still enslaved around 1724. And so I had the will of the son of John Carter, whose name was Robert King Carter. And they called him King. He was a counselor. And he was a very rich man. And he wanted to be the governor of Virginia, but he wasn't. So he built a house right next door to the governor of Virginia. And he had just as many enslaved. I don't like to say slave. Our people were enslaved.
Yes.
Because if you have that slave mentality, then you will have, you will have a slave mentality. So they were enslaved, but very smart. So it just kept going from John Carter to Robert King Carter, Robert Carter II, Robert Carter III, right down the line. And so the slaves, they were having babies. And, they kept multiplying. And so not only were there the Gumby slaves, but there were other, were other slaves too. But this particular family had 18 plantations. 18. He had the largest number of slaves, thousands, and the largest number of plantations in the Commonwealth of Virginia, which is a state. It's the Commonwealth of Virginia.
Wow.
They got 18 plantations.
18. And
not 18 slaves.
No.
18 plantations.
Named
Yes.
the
Acres,
plantations after what we call the stars, like Virgo plantations.
The Zodiac.
Zodiac, Virgo plantations. So they all had those kind of names.
Wow. Like, what do you feel like was your most helpful resource in finding this information? Do you feel like it was just something like, oh, okay, since you know your family, like, let me just ask a couple of questions? Or do you feel like it was like, oh, let me go to Google? Or was it like Google mixed with books, mixed with like.
It was, yes. I did start with Google, and a lot of materials now are being digitized.
Mm-hmm.
So you have um, a lot of records like wills, probate, land records, books are being digitized. So once they are digitized, and then you can do a Google search or a Bing search or whatever your search engine might be, and find quite a lot. But after a while, after you go through the census and find out what you can find, um, you go through two different journals. And so a lot of the older records were through journals.
Mm.
So I found a journal called the Journal of, it was like Virginia History.
Mm-hmm.
It might not be that exact term. I don't want
Right.
to stop and look at the book because we'll lose time that way. But so to keep on talking, I did find several pages of references, about Gumby, old Gumby, Tom Gumby, his kids, David Gumby, Willoughby Gumby, on and on. And then when Robert Carter III, um, after he went to a school in England, came back and also went to the College of William and Mary in Virginia, he decided that slavery was wrong. And so he started about to manumit, we call it manumission or emancipate his slaves. And so we're talking about quite a large number.
Right.
And so in August of 1791, and so we're talking before the founding of the United States in 1770. No, that was right afterwards. Right after that, 1791, and the United States Constitution was 1776. But right after that, he decided to file papers in the Northumberland County, Virginia, and saying that he wanted to manumit 509 individuals.
Ooh, that's
and
beautiful.
he
Okay.
did just that.
Mm.
And it was so many per year. Now, if you were over the age of 45, then you were, I'll say, quote, freed or manumitted right away.
Oh, okay.
And so he had a list. So there was a list of several Gumbys who were right away because they were over 45. So at that time, he felt, okay, maybe you worked long enough.
Yeah.
And so you are free.
Huh.
And so, and then after that, different families, and then children. And sometimes the parents were manumitted and the children were still enslaved.
Wow.
And that was because he said he wanted to train them. And one thing that they would do, and this was back with his grandfather, they would teach the enslaved. In a lot of respects, the older enslaved individual came with skills.
Mhm.
I mean, back in Africa, they were building things, just building things of wood. They knew how to, cut down trees and make, the villages or whatever. And so they, were, they could build boats. So they knew how to do certain skills anyway. But he wanted to make sure that the children learned a skill in cabinet making, shoe making, building barrels, clothing, knitting, those kinds of things. So some of them were manumitted later.
Which, if you really think about it, I mean, on one hand, it sounds kind of bad because it's like, dang, you gonna make me still be a slave? Like, you gonna let my mama go, but you gonna keep me here.
Right.
But then in the same sense, it's like everybody needs a skill. Everybody need
Well,
a trade.
his thinking was if he was going to emancipate a person, give them a skill so they could work and take care of themselves.
Exactly.
And I don't think that's a bad concept, though. Because the thing is, once you be free, like, I've been taking care of you for all of this time. If I say, hey, go out into the world, what you gonna do?
Yeah, well, in a lot of respects, the enslaved were taking care
of the masters.
Yeah.
Right, I'm going to turn it around. In a lot of cases, they built their houses. You know, they build everything, even the ships that went out to sea and back to England. They were building all that. So we were really doing a lot of what I call free labor. Free labor for so many years. Yes. For a lot of years. And then within itself, those who were enslaved, they were worth so much, and so it made the slave owner wealthy.
Yeah.
The 50, I guess there was a pound, a British pound. So I looked up the value of the British pound back in I think I put in 1791. I think I bought it with me. Let me see if I can find it real quick. Here it is. You hear the paper rattling. So back in 1655, I'll go back to that one Gumby. He was worth 50 pounds. So that value, if you equate that in today's dollars, was $12,850.
My goodness.
A person.
Per person. So,
and you got 18 plantations full of them. Your money long,
man.
So if you look at it in those terms, and you had a plantation owner that had, if you look at this, I don't know how many slaves. I'll let you all see that paper, but say there were 30 people on there, and you multiply that. I don't know how many are on there. There's just a lot of people, a lot of different.
Yes, and they have different prices.
They have different price
for each of
prices on there, but so they were very wealthy landowners.
My goodness. Well, I want to go back to what you said. 1791 was when your family, the Gumby family, was getting emancipated. And slavery officially ended in
among other families. There were other families.
Among other families.
I just happened to capture the Gumby name.
So 1865 was when the whole thing ended. That was 74 years before slavery actually ended for everyone.
Right.
They had something going on before everybody else did. How did that affect your family and all everybody else that was freed from those plantations at that time when there was nobody else from any other plantation?
Well, probably on their own. A lot of them began to migrate to different places in Virginia. I have records of some of the Gumbys going to Winchester, Virginia, Richmond, Virginia, and other places. But you had to have a job very quickly. There were laws that suddenly appeared. If you did not have a job in Virginia, you had to leave the state.
Oh my goodness.
Wow.
That was one way of controlling, the number of black people, who were hanging around. You had to have a job. And
of course it ain't jobs.
A lot of them worked. All of them worked. Because I found other records where you had to pay taxes. So if you didn't have the money to pay taxes, you hired yourself out. I might have, there's somewhere in one of these documents where I found Gumbies on a list of delinquent taxes. So you had to hire yourself out. So that meant, okay, I'm going to go work for somebody else, or you had to work it off. So in a manner of speaking, from that standpoint, you were emancipated or free, but you still had to hire yourself out, and so the money that you earned wasn't yours. It went to pay the tax.
So so the real question is, are you really free?
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly.
You gonna tell me, yeah, you over 45, so you can leave, no problem. But then turn around and say, but in order for you to stay, you gotta have a job.
You have to have a job.
And if you don't got no job, then you gotta go work for somebody because you still gotta pay taxes. Can I just go back to plantation? Can we skip all of this? Because this sounds like a catch-22. Y'all, this is a setup. Because if I don't go, like you said, this isn't optional. This isn't one of those things like, okay, well, you either pay your taxes or you don't pay at all. It's all right. We'll work with you. No, either you're gonna pay your taxes or you leave the state. And so if you leave the state, sometimes that means you leaving your family, you leaving your kids. All
you take them with you because they couldn't stay. There was no means of support.
What about the ones that were still enslaved?
They would stay until that child.
Yeah.
You had to, from that respect, you had to stay. You
yeah.
didn't want to leave.
So it's a possibility, now you're being separated from your family because...
Or those children, went to stay with a relative or someone who would care for them until that year came up.
And still, it would be risky to leave, right? Because we were talking before we started recording that you have the papers that show that you're free, but those papers can get damaged or
taken away.
Or
if you were on a road by yourself and you came across, teams of overseers, worked with somebody else, they could really just take that paper, tear it up.
And you're slave.
Now what?
Yeah, right. They could resell you. So, that happened.
Oh, goodness.
That happened.
And that's so damaging because it's a piece of paper.
It was a piece of paper.
Like that's it. Literally, your life is being held in the balance by a piece of paper. Because if y'all come and take it, I have to go back.
Unless you could prove it in the courts. And, I'm sure the courts had a record. And when I found that, it was a record. And so I am sure that Nelson Gumby, the person that was assigned to in 1852, that there was some kind of record perhaps at the court. And that's where it came from.
My goodness gracious. It's hard living back in them times, I'll tell you what. But if you don't know your history, how are you going to know?
It will repeat itself.
It will repeat itself,
so
correct?
I think, and this is, for the most part, it is history for us, family history for me, and to share with everyone else. And I'm not the only one that has been able to produce some history. It's all over the place. And I like reading other people's history or our history. It might not be my immediate family, but it's something that is impressive to me. They worked hard, And sometimes, coming through my career, I felt I worked hard, but it was not the labor.
And you go back and you read stuff like that and you let me shut up. What am I sitting here complaining for? Because like you said, we don't know the definition of work until you see what they was doing. That was some real life work. And so even now, in present day, that's why it's so important to have this type of information, because like you said, if we don't have it, we're going to repeat history every time. And that's not something that we want to do.
Right.
So my question to you is, since because I know it's taken so much time for you to gather all of this information together. I know it's taking years, time, blood, sweat, tears, because this is not just something that you can just do in a matter of a month. So it's now that you have this information, how do you feel it's affecting the people that you share it with?
I've run into a lot of people. Uh, they're interested in it and the content and the ability to identify slave owners because that's something a lot of people cannot do. Um, it's a that my family, I think I've identified 6 slave owners from 1655 up until the last one, Robert Carter III. So um, then on my paternal mother's side, uh, just one slave owner, and that's because I read the transcript of I think she would be my second or third great auntie, and she said she worked for Dr. Thomas Nelson, and she attended to his 3 sisters, and she gave their names, and this was in the Civil War record of my great grandfather, and I was able to take those names and find Dr. Nelson and his whole family, his mother and his father, and those names were there, Betsy, and there were a couple other names I don't want to call them wrong names, but they were there, and so I just at that point I'm like, wow, even to me, it was surprising the information I was able to find.
Yeah.
And so I wanted to share that, but then wanting to help other people to identify their histories. So,
because if you can do it, we all can do it.
Exactly.
Easy.
Exactly.
True.
It just takes literally
it takes
some time.
It takes time. It takes a lot of digging. Your court records, land records. To flip it on my mother's side, I had the voting records of my second great grandfather and his brothers.
Oh wow!
From 1867, and so that was probably a couple of years after the Civil War, and there they were voting in Texas.
Wow,
that's dope.
I know,
that's dope.
Because it's like all this time has passed, and now look, y'all can go out there and y'all can actually vote for yourselves now.
I have another question. Do you think that our ancestors, how would they feel about the modern day black man today? Would they be proud of us?
I didn't say that. Erica asked that question.
I think
just in case
they would be proud to know that Barack Obama was the president.
Yeah, two terms.
President of the United States. In terms of what's going on today, like the shooting and the unrest.
Yes.
And injustice. Right, the injustice and the way we treat each other. Because there may have been problems back then. And I can only know through what I've been able to read. But I'm thinking that people helped one another, and they had very little time to really help each other because they slaved from sun up
working.
Right
to sundown. And you may have gotten Sunday off in some respect, and maybe sometimes you didn't. But I would think that today's world would be probably to them, I don't want to say hard to believe, but very different. I think each generation is very different. And even those of my generation, today is very different.
It is.
Because I don't recall coming through high school that anybody would shoot anybody else. You probably just use your fist.
Yeah.
And you can live to fight another
day. Every time.
But it's very different. So I would, just in looking back at the paintings that we saw in the front of my book is a painting. And it was actually penned. A guy actually just drew that in pen and ink. And so they colored it in.
Beautiful.
just looking at that, they were probably helpful to one another.
I would believe so too. I would think so too. I don't think they would.
Not to say that we don't help each other today, because we do, but
Oh, and nobody running around killing each other.
No.
They were all they really had, so they try to.
I feel like, too, it's because, like you said, like they didn't have the time to do it, but we were so helpful for one another. Like, wasn't nobody thinking about killing nobody. You know what I'm saying? If I'm sitting here trying to help you, I don't got time to think about how to kill you in the same breath. You know what I'm saying? Like, back then, it was like we had so many white people against us. At this point, we just trying to survive.
Yes.
Like, I don't care about the fact that your shoes is cleaner than my shoes. I don't care about the fact that your haircut is newer than my haircut. I just want to be alive.
Exactly.
Because they trying to take us back to the plantation. So, you know what I'm saying?
Even if they had shoes back then.
Yeah. So I can understand why it is so different now. I mean, it kind of makes sense. Like, one thing that you said that kind of made me think about the differences too is how you said you had the will of King Carter. And when you think about, like, now in 2019, we talk about life insurance all the time, and we talk about people having wills and stuff, and that's not something you see that often in our community anymore. When you were reading his will, what is, like, one of the biggest differences that you noticed compared to a will that you would read in 2019?
I think it's almost the same. And if I can just read a couple
Yes, ma'am.
of sentences,
Please do.
a part of his will, I think might be the same. Then they had what you would call necessities. They had food and silver and what they drank out of and clothing and a lot of animals. So, and then they had people. So, one reference that he had is of my gift to my said son, John, I give and devise unto my son Robert, unto the heirs male, issue of his body lawfully begotten, is also the following Negro slaves. To my Negro George, the cooper, and then he listed his job, the cooper, and his wife and children. And this is what he was given to his son John. The two Negroes I have now bound out as apprentices to William Garland. Also the Negro boy that is an apprentice to George, the cooper. Also my Negro boy David. So he's giving to his son John, this person, that person, this person. To Tom Gumby's brother, and likewise my cook, he called her a wrench, Press, that was her name, and her husband, old Robin, and her children. So
old Robin,
yes, and his name was Robin Gumby. So
he didn't even have respect for them, like, in their positions, like in their name.
No.
Robin.
So that's an example of the will. And another example would be to this will, I have 2 or 3 beds, I have dishes, I have buckets of this, I have wine, I have fishing rods and things like that. And today's will, of course, things have changed, and so we have so much more. That I give you my house and all the contents, and so the contents, you're gonna have everything is in that house. And today, you may have a bank account, you may have a 401k, with money in it.
You know, we ain't had none of that back then.
So that's the difference, but the principle is still the same.
Right.
I want you to have what I have, and that includes people.
Mm.
So probably that's the only difference.
Okay. You actually have more publications than just the story of Gumby. Is that correct? Over 20?
I do, but genealogy wise, it's this book, The Story of Gumby, and then I have one on my grandmother's side, and that's called Elias and Lucinda Parker: The Case for a Civil War Widow's Pension. And so I sent for the Civil War records of my first great grandfather. His name was Elias Parker. And so I got from the National Archives 146 pages about him and his life. And so I stayed up all night. When I got it that day, I didn't go to bed. I stayed up and I read the whole thing and just went over it and went over it and went over it. So I took that material and put it in a book. So I said, I want future family to read this. And so now I have to do another reprint on that book because
you found out more.
Well, in Pennsylvania, we're trying to save the old church that was built 1866. So people want that book to read about him, and he built that church.
Oh, okay.
Mm-hmm. So, and then the other publications I have are research publications that I did over the course of several years. I like research, so I just put together some research bibliographies over certain topics.
That's neat. That's really neat. Well, so with the Story of Gumby, where can everybody find this book if they want to purchase it? Where do they go?
Amazon.com is one place. To my website, which is storyofgumby.com.
Okay.
And also, I do have a Facebook page.
All right.
Called Story of Gumby.
Story of Gumby.
Okay.
All right, cool. And that's where everybody can find you at. Story of Gumby.
So make sure when y'all find some free time, y'all definitely go on Facebook and y'all go on Amazon and y'all definitely check out the book. It is so interesting.
And it will help you also learn a little bit of history just about Black history.
Because we all Black, you know what I'm saying? So we all need to know our history. It's still February. Don't forget it's still Black History Month, okay? It ain't over yet.
And here's the thing. So Black history is every day.
That's right. 365.
Yes.
365 Black.
Right. Every day. We just don't stop. Don't stop.
Yes.
Yeah, you don't have to stop in February. If it's July,
days,
keep going.
And you look down and you still recognize you Black, you still need to be doing your research.
Day,
That's right.
Every day.
Every day. I love it. I love it. You gotta know your history, y'all. So you won't get played in the future.
Right. That part.
Now, this is the first question I asked you before we even started recording, and I want everybody else to know too, because I was interested in finding out my history, but I didn't know where to get started. What is the best way to get started to learn your history, to get a family tree going? What's the best method to start off? I know there's sometimes there might be a little roadblock here and there once you get further back in the years, but
probably what you want to do
to start off,
talk to older relatives and find out. Just ask them questions like I did. Mm-hmm. Where are you from? Where were you born? And then begin with yourself. Go to Amazon, and these are free. Amazon, you can online start your family tree. The same with myheritage.com. The same with familysearch.org. Those three places. Then there's Roots Magic. They're essentials. I think it's not a package, but it's rootsmagic.com. And there's a free site there. And so you're going to start with yourself, where you were born, the year, location, all that. And then your parents and your grandparents, your great-grandparents. Include brothers and sisters of each of these generations, and go back as far as you can. Utilize census. The most recent census out now is 1940. The census is out every year. Then there's 1930. And so you're going to go back and to grandparents, great-grandparents. Then there's 1920, 1910, and every 10 years back. In 1890, that census burned. But there are other ways to find out during the decade of 1890s. There's the county courthouse. You can go there where you can find out tax records and land records. You can use Google and put quotation marks. If your grandmother's name was Hattie Davis, put a quotation mark. Hattie Davis, quotation mark, a space. If she was from Mississippi, put a quotation mark, Mississippi, or the name of the town, Tougaloo, Mississippi, and then quotation marks, and hit enter and see what you can find. So that is one way. The census goes all the way back to 1790. And I did find John Gumby, Nelson Gumby in the 1800s. They had not been, I'm going to say freed. They had only been manumitted a couple of years. And they showed up in the census 1800. So, and then go online and how to do genealogy. You can go to my website, leave me a question. You can go on Facebook, Story of Gumby at Facebook, and leave me a question. I will help you.
Oh,
please.
That's awesome, y'all. She's trying to help y'all find y'all history.
So there ain't no excuse.
No excuse. Thank you for coming, Miss Rosalind.
Thank you
really
for
appreciate
having me.
It was fun. I feel like I learned so much today.
I'm glad.
Exactly.
I'm glad. Thank you for having me.
Story of Gumby, y'all. Story of Gumby you can find on Amazon, and look her up on Facebook under Story of Gumby. Thank you again. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you. This is awesome. All right, Night Hypers. That's it.
Y'all be safe out there.
Yes.
We love y'all.
Till next time.
Next time.
Bye.